Good evening. Welcome everyone to another Conversations in the Void. I am Graveyard, joined as always by my off-screen producer, Salem. So, without further ado, I am pleased to introduce the one and only and very talented Bruce G. Hallenbeck.
Howdy.
Hi, how's it going?
Pretty good. By the way, the G stands for gore, in case you're
For
wondering.
gore? Oh,
Of course.
oh man, it's been a week, quite a week for me. I don't know about you, but
Hmm. It's a strange year so far, let's put it that way.
yes. But without further ado, let's get into some of these icebreaker questions. If you are ready, sir. So,
Okay.
what I always like to get to know the guest a little bit. Do you recall what movie really brought you into the horror world?
I do indeed. I was 5 years old, and I remember lying on the couch with my father watching a movie on TV called The Undying Monster, which is a fairly obscure 1940s werewolf movie.
Hmm.
And I was just fascinated by the atmosphere and the monster and all of it. And I was hooked from then on.
Yeah, that is a deep cut for a lot of people that don't know they're old black and white movies. I mean, those are classics. They really are. You know.
Oh yeah, yep.
So I mean,
And a
and
few
the
months after that, they had Oop.
what was that? Can you hear me?
I was going to say a few months after that, they had Shock Theater on our local TV station, and they showed all the old Universal classics. And then in the movies, when I was a lad, I saw movies like The Fly and Horror of Dracula, and all those great classics. So I had no choice; I had to be a fan.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, so what kind of really brought you we'll get into your movie career as well here in a little bit, but what kind of made you go, "Hey, I can make a movie too."
Well, when I started making films when I was a teenager, um, some of the first ones I did were claymation, and I was basically imitating Ray Harryhausen, who was
Uh-huh.
one of my heroes, and uh, and Willis O'Brien. I also my first little film that I made actually I think was a sequel to The Son of Kong. Have you ever seen Son of Kong?
Yes, I have.
I couldn't accept the fact that the Son of Kong died, so I brought him back in a sequel and animated him myself. So that's where it all started, really.
So what was that? What was the kind of that process? Just give us of doing claymation.
Well, it's very painstaking. I'm the thing is that I was never much of an artist, but I made like little dinosaurs and King Kong himself, and they probably look like Picasso's, but that's what I did when I was a kid, and it took like all day to do one shot, which to me was uh, quite a long day, but it was fun though. I mean, I loved every minute of it.
How long did those first movies with claymation actually end up being in total length?
Oh, they were short films. They were probably about 10 or 12 minutes, you know.
Oh, wow.
But hey, it was a start, and
Yeah,
I think I was 13 when I made those.
awesome. Awesome. That's a unique thing. I don't hear many people really starting that way anymore. And I think it's kind of getting to be a lost art form. It's coming back a little bit,
Yeah,
but not the way it used to be.
yeah, it pretty much is a lost art form now with CGI and everything. But I love the hands-on quality of animation. 3D animation. It's just you really can't beat it. It just you inject your own personality into your characters.
Right. Right. So with you being a writer of many books about history and stuff like that, to you, what is the most underrated movie that doesn't get enough love or appreciation that you'd love to have people watch?
Underrated horror movie?
Yeah.
Uh, well, there's quite a few of those. Let me think now. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Hammer horror films. I've written several books about just about them.
Mhm.
Some of their films are quite underrated, like The Reptile. That's a personal favorite of mine. Um, a lot of the British stuff that you don't hear about that much anymore. Uh, I wouldn't say this movie is underrated, but The Haunting is one of my favorite uh, horror films. The one directed by Robert Wise in 1963.
Yes.
It's widescreen black and white, which is a beautiful format, first of all. You hardly see anything, but it scares the heck out of you. It's one of the few movies that ever gave me goosebumps, and it still does to this day, actually.
Yeah, yeah. That was based off of the Haunting of Hill House, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's been remade a couple of times, but I think the original one is by far the best.
Oh yeah, for sure. But on the flip side, then, what do you think is the most overrated horror franchise or movie or TV show that you just don't understand why it's $1 billion industry for that?
Um, Boy, I don't know. You're putting me on the spot here. I the Scream franchise is okay. It doesn't do a lot for me because it's kind of too in jokey.
Mhm.
I kind of prefer my horror stuff a little more on the straight side, but I don't dislike it. It's just I would say it's a bit overrated.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's very meta, and it tries to show, hey, we know this horror movie. We can name this list of horror movies. Look at us, right?
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I prefer films that have good characterizations and really solid stories. And they're kind of few and far between these days, but they're out there.
Now, do you think the solid stories are hard to do in slasher movies overall?
Well, in slasher movies, probably, but if you're talking about the horror film in general, there are quite a few that have really, good stories, good characters. I mean, The Haunting is one of those.
Right.
Um, but there are quite a few others. I mean, movies like Village of the Damned, and
Yeah.
one of my personal favorites of the Hammer stuff is The Abominable Snowman, which is extremely intelligent kind of sci-fi horror with Peter Cushing and Forster. And again, you don't see that much, but what you do experience is a lot of suspense and tension. And I've heard that Hammer is considering remaking that because they're still a going concern.
Right.
Um, and I'd be interested to see that.
Yeah. Anyone who knows me personally and my offspring producer, we collect laserdisc movies. Right. We took that old technology, the giant CDs that were movies,
Hmm.
and I made it my personal goal to collect every Universal monster movie on there, every Hammer horror movie as well. Just to, I love that history that is
Uh,
there with the 30s and 40s and 50s of the classic Universal, and then
yeah,
the Hammer remakes of the 60s, 70s, and 80s as well.
hmm
So yeah,
yeah. What's
I think
great to me
appreciation is
is that
overrated.
now. No, go ahead.
I was saying I think it's lost. The older movies have lost appreciation over the past 90 years, essentially at this point in time, that people do not acknowledge them or give them the credit they are deserved.
Well, it's great now that you have access to just about every classic film ever made, and I hope that people do look up the old classics instead of just concentrating on the latest hits because there's so much richness to be found there. It's just phenomenal. I love the Hammer stuff. I love the Universal stuff. the AIP movies, especially the Roger Corman films with Vincent
Mhm.
Price. All that stuff is just great. And it's what I grew up with. Well, actually, I didn't grow up at all, but that's the point.
Yeah, one of our first episodes we did on our other podcast was we discussed the history of horror, and we sat down and watched every Vincent Price, Edgar Allan Poe movie and rated it and read the short stories just to get a full appreciation of it all.
Yep.
So, I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, you can't go wrong with those. I mean, they're just so entertaining.
mhm, for sure, for sure. So, with your knowledge of your research of your books that you're doing, you know, a lot of people understand why the importance is there for the history of horror movies and movies overall. What would you want to say to people to say, hey, let's preserve this, or what can we do to get more people, you know, interested in the old movies?
Well, as I say, you have access to just about every classic film now at the touch of a button, more or less. And you know, I think a lot of younger folks probably don't want to watch a black and white movie, or they think anything made before, I don't know, 1990 or so is probably too old fashioned. But there's so much grandeur there in the old classics. And, yeah, I'm a geezer, but I mean, the point being that you love what you grew up with. And I love those films, but I also love current films. And, you just have to have an open mind about this and, not be swayed by popular opinion. Just look for what you like.
For sure, for sure. So obviously, I've read a lot of reviews. Your movies are queued up on my playlist to watch this weekend as well. That your movies are really reminiscent of Hammer horror. Do you take that? Obviously, that was probably your goal at this point, right? Was to be reminiscent of Hammer horror. How's that here? How's that make you feel to hear that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's great to hear if people feel that way. I certainly don't think any of my movies, comes close to capturing the old Hammer magic. But if you can see the influence there, then that's wonderful. We never working in indie films, you never have the money to do what you really want to do. I think the most we ever had to work with was about $60,000, which is the price of a Hollywood lunch, as they say. But you know, it's always gratifying to hear people say something nice about these films. And actually, they're becoming, well, I don't know about classics, but they're old cult films now. I guess some of them. The first professional one I did was Vampyre, and that was in 1990, and that was a remake of the old Carl Dreyer film Vampyre. But we kind of made it as if Hammer made it, sort of, with the beautiful women and a certain amount of gore and a lot of atmosphere. And it actually got some good reviews. There's a book called The Vampyre Film by Elaine Silver, and he had some very nice things to say about that movie in that book. So that was very satisfying. Yeah.
So let's go and talk about your first movie here. What kind of made you lean in the direction of remaking, that movie, Vampire?
Well, it's kind of a long story because originally I wanted to make something that was even more Hammer-like, actually. Back in 1985, um, I I had a production package that I got together with a couple of other producers to make a movie called Gravesend, and I wrote the script, and I sent the script to some of the Hammer actors like Caroline Munro, who I knew, and Ralph Bates, and a few others. And they all liked the script, and they all kind of rallied around it. They sent me letters of intent, and we were going to make this film. and it was announced in Variety in 1985 in their special Cannes Film Festival issue. And we were all ready to go. And then at the last minute, the producers in England pulled out, and they decided not to do it, and everybody was crushed. So I thought, okay, well, this is a real setback here, but I decided to go out and produce my own movie. And we thought that a sort of remake of Vampyre would be very doable because it basically all takes place in one setting and didn't involve a lot of actors, wouldn't involve a lot of money. I happen to know this guy. He was kind of an eccentric rich guy who owned a 19th century village in the middle of nowhere that he restored. And so we were free to use this 19th century village for our movie. And it really gave it an atmosphere that would be hard to buy. So it all worked out very well and ended up getting distributed on VHS back in 1990 and then subsequently in DVD. And now it's streaming. It was streaming on Prime. I'm not sure if it still is. But, here we are 34 years later and it's still out there, which is kind of neat.
Right. I mean, do you think it's easier for indie film creators to get their stuff out there today versus it was for you in 1990?
Well, there's certainly a lot more platforms. I mean, back in 1990, you had VHS, or, if you were really lucky, theatrical. Um, but, we shot in 16 millimeters, so we didn't really expect a theatrical release. Plus, we edited on video. So, VHS was fine with me. I always said I don't care about the size of the screen as long as people see it. Um, but now, yeah, I mean, now you've got all these streaming platforms. You have DVD or Blu-ray. There are so many venues now for your movie. So yeah, it's kind of a golden age, I think, for indie filmmakers.
Yeah, I mean, why do you think indie film has been making such a huge resurgence? I say in the past maybe 5 to 7 years, especially.
Yeah, well, I think it has to do with the streaming platforms. I mean, you've got indie movies now playing on the same platforms as big Hollywood studio movies, and that really has never happened before. So I think it's pretty eye-opening to a lot of people who may have never been exposed to indie films before. And that's a good thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. I liken this a lot to the mid 80s to late 80s and 90s, as you said, you had VHS where everyone had like a copy of the VHS and a copy of that VHS, and so on. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it's now just there with streaming.
Yep. Yeah, it's similar to that. I mean, back in the 80s, home video kind of replaced the drive-in in some ways. And a lot of movies that would have been made for drive-ins years before were made for home video. And that was, a big time for indies back then. And then it kind of fizzled out somewhere in the maybe late 90s or so.
Mhm.
But then it came back, and now it's stronger than ever.
Right. Well, if you were given the opportunity, would you go back and remake your script for the Hammer horror that you had in '85?
Oh, the Gravesend script?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I mean, I couldn't do it with those actors, unfortunately, because Ralph Bates passed away years ago. And I mean, Caroline's around, but, everybody's older. So we'd have to recast it. But sure, I would do that in a heartbeat if somebody gave me some money to do it, because that one would require, more than a DIY kind of budget. I think it would, you know, there were a lot of special effects and a lot of things in that we need some money for. I'm certainly open to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is there any other movie that you'd like to do a remake of?
Well, actually, at one time back in the '90s, I was trying to get a remake of Horror Hotel going. It's also known as City of the Dead, and I made my version. I titled it Raven's Inn, and it was going to star Jeffrey Combs. Actually, he was very interested in that movie.
Oh, wow.
He liked the script and he wanted to do it, but again, we couldn't get the financing. So yeah, I'd still like to do that one too.
Now, did you go to any schools for directing or writing or acting at all?
Not really. I was a stage actor for a while. I had a lot of you know lessons in stage acting, and I did a few video workshops and things like that. And I took some film courses, but I don't have any real um, you know tremendous background in that. But it's really all just the love of the art. That's really what it's all about for me.
Right. Now, what was it like directing scenes that you were in for with your movies like Vampyre?
Well, generally speaking, I don't act much in my own films. I'll have a cameo here or there, for the most part. I do my Hitchcock thing and kind of walk off. Um, but I do like to act in other people's films. In fact, I just finished a movie called Kaleidoscope, which is kind of a Hitchcockian suspense thriller directed by my friend Joe Bagnardi. He and I have collaborated on a lot of projects over the years, and we just finished up that one. I ended up playing my umpteenth professor type. I seem to play a lot of professor types. I'm typecast, which is okay. Um, I'd rather be typecast as a professor than a moron, that's for sure. So, but we just finished filming that, and that's probably going to be out later this year, we're hoping. And I have a long awaited movie. And when I say long, I mean like 30 years long, called Black Easter, which stars Veronica Carlson, who was a Hammer leading lady for several films. And she was a friend of mine, and it's a multi-story format, like the old Amicus films. And she stars in one of the stories. It was a movie that we shot originally, believe it or not, in 1994, and uh, it was held up by the producer for whatever reason. I don't know. But the producer passed away a couple of years ago, and the movie ended up back in my hands, and now it's being edited down in New Jersey by I don't know if you know Mike Razzo and Pop Cinema,
Okay.
but Mike distributed a lot of my other films, and looks like it's finally going to be released after all this time. So we'll just call it an unheralded classic. How's that?
There you go. There you go. Now, do you think with the movies that we've lost to history that we never got copies of, that do you have this fear that the digital format only will make us lose movies in the future?
That does scare me a little bit. Those of us who collect a lot of physical media, like me, I have a few thousand movies, on Blu-ray and DVD. Um, we could end up being the saviors of some of these films because I don't necessarily trust non-physical media in the sense that it just doesn't seem permanent to me. You know, if you
Right.
can't hold it in your hand, it kind of scares me that it might not be real. So, you know, yeah, that does bother me a little bit. I mean, streaming is great, and I stream a lot of stuff, but I think physical media is very important too, and I think it should be kept around for sure.
Oh yeah, we had, yeah, have you talked to my wife? She doesn't like me collecting physical media anymore.
Hmm.
So
I know that problem very well.
yeah. So we're closing up here because this honestly flew by fast. I know you have a couple of books coming out that you're working on. Can you tell us what they are about?
Yeah, my 13th book in the last 13 years is it's called Blazing Saddles Meets Young Frankenstein, the 50th anniversary of the year of Mel Brooks, and it's being published by Applause Books in New York, and that'll be out, I think, in the next few months. I don't have an exact date. And then I have a book called The Hammer Thriller, which is being published in the UK by Hemlock Books, and that's about Hammer's suspense and kind of macabre films, but uh, some of the oddball titles like Die Die My Darling and Paranoid and movies like that. So yeah, this year is going to be a busy one.
That sounds amazing. Like I said, I love Hammer horror. I need to watch them more often than I do, quite
Well, God bless you.
honestly. All right, so let's get into the roundup questions here. Um, what's your favorite scary movie?
My favorite of all time. I don't have one. It would be like asking me, what's my favorite child. Um, I mean, obviously, I'm big on the Hammer stuff. I can tell you my three favorite vampire movies are their first three vampire movies: Horror of Dracula, Brides of Dracula, and Kiss of the Vampire. Those are my three top vampire films. Favorite horror movies of all time. I have to say The Haunting is up there. It's certainly one of the few that actually scares me.
Mhm.
And the original Fly, when I saw the original Fly when I was 5, I think it gave me a fear of spiders that I've had ever since because of that last scene.
Right.
Uh, so, um, but yeah, I mean, again, I guess I go for the old classics, but you know, the, those are the ones that come to mind immediately. And of course, the original Nosferatu.
Yep.
And I'm really looking forward to Robert Eggers' new version of that. That should be very interesting.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you think there'll ever be a time where we get rid of practical effects for pure CGI, in, especially horror movies?
That we get rid of practical effects? Is that,
Yeah.
was that your question? I couldn't hear
Yeah.
you. I think we pretty much have, haven't we? I mean, it's not an indie films, but studio films certainly seem to be all CGI these days. And you got the whole AI controversy right now, which is a little disturbing. Yeah, I prefer the old practical stuff myself. So you
Oh
know,
yeah.
but
Yeah,
I
for
don't know. I
sure.
mean, I think there's always gonna be room for it. You know, I hope.
Right. So, do you have any advice for anyone trying to get into the field, whether it's movie making or book writing or directing or acting?
Well, it's pretty basic. If you want to write a book, read as many books as you can, and if you want to make movies, see as many movies as you can. Just learn. You learn the craft by reading and viewing. That's certainly what I did, and I think if you love movies and books enough, and you want to make them, you will. One way or another, you'll find a way to do it.
Right. That's good advice. I like it. All right. So, are you ready for your random horror movie trivia question?
Okay.
All right. Psycho was the first American film to show what?
A toilet flushing.
Yes. Absolutely. I don't
You
think most
see, I've
people
been
know that.
around. No,
All
it's
right.
yeah, it's true.
All
Of all the things, of all the things for Psycho to show, but there you go.
All right, Bruce, give us your plugins. Where can people follow you and your work and your movies?
Well, I have a very high profile on Facebook. I have about 4,000, well, more than 4,000 friends and fans. And you can find most of my books and some of my films on Amazon. Just type in my name, Bruce G. Hallenbeck, G for Gore. Don't forget that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Bruce, for joining us tonight on the show. It's a pleasure having you. Once again, I've been Graveyard. You can follow us all social media at Pod Out at Night. And yeah, it's been a blast as always. And we'll see you next time. Make sure to not get lost in the void.
Thank you.